General Zarkin stood in the Grand Council chamber aboard his ship, the Zoreth, a massive vessel that could easily obliterate planets with a single strike. His eyes scanned the room, where the leaders of the Zthar Dominion, a vast and powerful galactic empire, waited for him to speak. The council members, many of them battle-hardened and proud of their many victories, were eager to discuss the next phase of the Dominion's expansion. But Zarkin had come to offer them something they were not prepared for, a warning. "I urge you all to listen closely," Zarkin began, his deep voice reverberating through the chamber. "The humans, they are not like the other species we have encountered. They are unlike any we have faced before." A murmur ran through the room. The Zthar had conquered countless worlds, destroyed fleets, and defeated warriors from countless civilizations. They were proud of their military prowess and technological superiority. The humans, however, were a relatively new and unknown force. They had only recently begun to spread beyond their home planet, Earth, but their rapid expansion had not gone unnoticed. Zarkin raised a hand to silence the whispers. "I have spent months observing them, gathering information from their outposts. Their technology is not advanced by our standards, but their resilience, their spirit, it is something we cannot ignore." He paused for a moment, letting his words sink in. The council members, some of whom had already dismissed the humans as a minor threat, now looked at him with growing curiosity. "Tell us, General," one of the council members, a tall and imposing Zthar named Varak, said with a sneer, "what is so special about these humans? They are primitive compared to us. How could they possibly pose a threat?" Zarkin's eyes narrowed. "I've seen them fight. They are fierce in ways we cannot predict. Their soldiers fight with determination beyond reason. Their tactics are unconventional. They adapt quickly, using whatever resources they have at their disposal. I believe they will not surrender easily." The council members exchanged skeptical glances. They had dealt with species far more advanced and dangerous than the humans. And yet, Zarkin's tone was serious, almost desperate. "You cannot possibly mean to suggest we fear these humans," Varak said, his voice dripping with disdain. Zarkin's expression hardened. "I do not fear them, but I do respect them. And I believe if we underestimate them, we will regret it." Another council member, a younger and less experienced officer named Cathar, spoke up. "General, are you saying that we should turn away from our conquest of Earth? We have already secured several human colonies on the fringes of their space. Why hesitate?" Zarkin's gaze remained steady. "Because if we continue this war, we risk provoking them in ways we do not yet understand. They are unpredictable. The more we push them, the more they will fight. And I do not believe we can defeat them with brute force alone." A silence fell over the room as the council members considered his words. Zarkin knew that they would never fully understand the humans, not in the way he had come to respect them. He had seen them in action, observed their courage and ingenuity on the battlefield. They were not an empire, not a force of nature like the Zthar, but they had something far more dangerous, a will to survive, to protect their world at all costs. "The humans are not the same as the Torithians we conquered years ago," Zarkin continued. "They will fight until the last man, and if we push them too far, they will unite against us, all their nations working together. Their will is strong, stronger than you can imagine." Varak scoffed. "You're making them sound like gods, General. We have the technology to crush them. One fleet is all we need." Zarkin shook his head. "Technology alone will not win this war. We've seen what happens when we try to rely solely on our advanced weapons. The humans may not have ships as powerful as ours, but their resourcefulness gives them an edge. They will fight in ways we cannot predict, using every tool they have at their disposal." Another council member, an older Zthar named Orthel, leaned forward. "So, what do you propose, General? Do we turn away from Earth, let them continue expanding and becoming a threat?" Zarkin hesitated, his mind racing. He had already seen what happened when the Zithar tried to wipe out entire civilizations without understanding them first. The last time they had done that, they had underestimated a race of creatures that had proved to be far more dangerous than they had ever imagined. "I suggest we approach this cautiously," Zarkin said slowly. "We should attempt diplomacy first. Let us make contact with their leaders, attempt to form an alliance, or at least a truce. If they refuse, then we will consider more aggressive measures. But I warn you, if we launch an all-out war, we will not emerge victorious without paying a heavy price." The council members were quiet, weighing his words. They had never considered the possibility of negotiating with humans, let alone forming any kind of alliance with a species so primitive in comparison to their own. But Zarkin's plea was compelling, and they knew that his wisdom had saved them before. Finally, Virax spoke again, his tone less certain. "We will consider your warning, General, but I will not promise that we will abandon our plans." Zarkin nodded. "I only ask that you keep an open mind. We are entering uncharted territory, and the humans are not like anything we faced before." As Zarkin left the council chamber, he couldn't shake the feeling that his warning might be too late. The Zithar had underestimated their enemies before. He hoped he wasn't about to make the same mistake again. Krax was his Star Scout, trained to observe and gather intelligence, but today he found himself in a situation he had never prepared for. His small reconnaissance ship had been hit by an unexpected barrage of human fighter jets. The humans were far more capable than he had thought. They had detected his presence in their space, and now his ship was crashing toward the surface of the planet. Tarax struggled to keep control of the ship as alarms blared around him. The ship shook violently, and he could hear the hum of the engine sputtering out of control. His mind raced as he tried to understand what had just happened. Starships were known to be nearly indestructible, yet these humans had somehow managed to damage his vessel with what appeared to be crude weapons by their standards. The planet below, Earth, loomed ever closer. His best option now was to make a controlled crash landing. His hands gripped the control panel tightly as he made adjustments, but it was no use. The ship was going down. With a final jolt, the ship slammed into the ground, sending a cloud of dirt and debris into the air. Tarax was thrown against his harness, but he quickly regained his composure. He had been in worse situations before, but this was different. This was Earth. The humans were not just an unknown species, they were a puzzle he had to solve. He unbuckled himself and quickly assessed the damage. The ship was disabled, and there was no way he could contact his fleet. He was stranded, alone, and vulnerable. As a scout, he had been trained for survival in hostile environments, but Earth was unlike any world he had visited. The air was thick, and the atmosphere was rich with strange sounds. He could hear animals in the distance and feel the ground shifting under his feet. Tarax quickly activated his personal cloaking device, making himself invisible to human sensors. He had to find a way to survive and gather information. His mission was far from over. He had to report back to the Zithar leadership, but first he needed to learn more about the humans, their weaknesses, and their strengths. As he moved cautiously through the forest surrounding the crash site, he took note of the unfamiliar landscape. It was wild and untamed, a far cry from the controlled environments he was used to. But it was also beautiful in its own way. The tall trees swayed in the wind, and the scent of flowers and fresh soil filled the air. He could hear the rustling of creatures in the underbrush. It was peaceful, almost serene. However, Tarax knew better than to be lulled by the beauty of the place. This was an alien world, and the humans were not to be underestimated. They had already proven their ability to detect his presence and attack his ship. He needed to stay alert. As he ventured deeper into the forest, Tarax came across a small human camp. He crouched low, observing from the shadows. The humans appeared to be ordinary soldiers, wearing combat gear and armed with rifles. But there was something different about them. They seemed relaxed, talking and laughing as they prepared their food over a fire. Tarax watched in silence, trying to make sense of this strange behavior. Why were they so calm? Were they unaware of the danger that lurked in the forest? He studied them for a few more moments, then made his move. He activated his cloaking device and silently approached the camp. He needed to gather information without alerting them to his presence. As he got closer, he overheard their conversation. "Did you hear about the alien ship that went down?" one of the soldiers asked, his voice calm but filled with curiosity. "I heard it was one of those Star Scouts. We need to find it before they do." The other soldier nodded. "Yeah, the Zithar have been watching our colonies for months. This is our chance to get some intel. I just hope the crash didn't damage the ship too much." Trax's mind raced. The humans were already aware of his presence. They were looking for him. But they weren't scared. They were strategizing. They had no idea how dangerous he was, how advanced his species was. They saw him as just another threat to deal with, another piece of the puzzle. And that's when it hit him. The humans were not afraid of him. They didn't fear the unknown like the other species he had encountered. They were willing to face whatever came their way. The realization shook him to his core. The humans were not the same as the others. They did not cower in the face of danger. They did not hide or flee. They fought, and they fought hard. Trax pulled back into the shadows, careful not to alert the humans to his presence. He needed to leave the area, find a safer spot to observe them. But the thought lingered in his mind. The humans were different. He had underestimated them, just as the Zithar had underestimated the Sorethians years ago. As he moved deeper into the forest, he felt the weight of his situation press down on him. The Zithar had always believed that their technology and military might make them unbeatable. But now, on this strange world, Trax was beginning to realize that there was something more powerful than technology, something the humans had in abundance, the will to fight. The question now was whether the Zithar Empire could defeat a species that was willing to fight for their survival, no matter the odds. Trax wasn't sure. But what he did know was that this was a war the Zithar could not win easily, and that was something he had to report back to the council, no matter the cost. General Zarkin stood at the head of the vast council hall aboard the Zoreth, watching as the members of the Zithar Empire's ruling body debated fiercely. The tension in the room was palpable, as the question of whether to invade Earth or seek diplomacy hung in the air. Zarkin had warned them, repeatedly, of the dangers of underestimating the humans, but the majority of the council remained unconvinced. They are primitive. Varak, the senior officer and vocal warhawk, argued. Their technology is nothing compared to ours. A few human colonies are no match for this Zithar dominion. We should strike them now, before they can gather strength. Zarkin's piercing eyes locked with Varak's. He had always respected his fellow officer, but the man's arrogance troubled him now. The Zithar had made similar mistakes in the past, underestimating their enemies, rushing into conflicts they were not prepared for. He had seen the results of such overconfidence, and the scars of those failures were still fresh in his mind. They fight with a strength that cannot be measured by technology alone. Zarkin replied, his voice steady. It is not their weapons that make them dangerous, but their unyielding will. Their soldiers are driven by a sense of survival that I have never seen before, and their ability to adapt. We cannot predict their tactics. The council grew quiet, but Varak scoffed. You speak of their spirit, General, but that is meaningless in the face of superior firepower. They will fall before us just as any other species has. Zarkin clenched his fists. I disagree. I have seen their will in action. I have observed their battles, and I have learned what sets them apart from the others. They are not like the Xorathians or the Vekthal. The humans do not simply fight. They innovate. They adapt. We may be stronger, but we are not invincible. Orthal, a seasoned and cautious council member, spoke up from his seat in the back. Perhaps there is truth in Zarkin's words. We have underestimated others before, only to suffer greatly for it. It is worth considering whether we should proceed with caution. Varak's face darkened with frustration. Are we to sit idle, waiting for them to become a real threat. We have already wasted too much time. The humans have only recently entered the galactic stage, and we can strike while they are still disorganized. But Zarkin, who had spent months studying the humans, knew that their strength was not just in their will, but in their ability to work together. The very thing that made them strong, their unity, their adaptability, was something the Zethar had never encountered before. Zarkin turned to face the council. The humans have something we do not. They are united in ways we cannot understand. They fight not for conquest, but for survival. And that makes them unpredictable. We cannot afford to assume they will fall as easily as the others. Kthar, the youngest council member, spoke with uncertainty. General, do you suggest we delay our plans to conquer Earth? If we do so, they may only grow stronger, and our opportunity will pass. Zarkin's expression softened, his voice becoming more measured. I do not propose we do nothing. I suggest we proceed carefully. We must first attempt diplomacy with them. If they refuse, then we can consider other options. But I believe we will regret it if we attack without first understanding what we are dealing with. The room fell into silence once again as the council members exchanged uneasy glances. Zarkin's warning had not fallen on deaf ears, but the question of whether they should listen to him remained uncertain. Virak, however, was unwilling to back down. Diplomacy. With these primitive humans, they do not deserve our attention. If we hesitate, they will only grow more confident, more dangerous. Zarkin met Virak's challenge with a calm gaze. We are not invincible, Virak. Our power is immense, but the humans are not like the others we have conquered. They fight with everything they have. We must approach them differently. The debate raged on for hours. The Warhawks, like Virak, were determined to strike before the humans could organize, while the more cautious members, including Urthal, began to see the wisdom in Zarkin's argument. But no decision was reached. The council could not agree on whether diplomacy was the right course, or if they should continue with their military plans. Zarkin knew time was running out. The Zethar Empire was ready to strike, and if they did, they risked awakening something far more dangerous than they anticipated. The humans had already proven themselves in battle, and if the Zethar underestimated them further, it could mean disaster for the entire Dominion. As the council session drew to a close, Zarkin walked out of the chamber, his mind heavy with the weight of the decision that was about to be made. He had done all he could to warn them. Now it was out of his hands. Meanwhile, on Earth, the humans were preparing for something they did not yet fully understand. The quiet whispers of a threat from the stars were growing louder, but they had no idea just how much danger they were in. They did not know the full scale of the Zethar Empire, nor the advanced technology they would face. All they knew was that something was coming. And as always, the humans would fight, as they always had. The question now was, would their fight be enough? Would their will to survive be enough to stop an empire that had already conquered countless worlds? General Zarkin hoped he would not have to answer that question with his own blood, but he feared that the time for diplomacy was quickly running out. In the early hours of dawn, a small military base nestled in the mountains of northern Earth began to stir. Soldiers, unaware of the gravity of the situation unfolding across the stars, went about their routine tasks. They trained, maintained their equipment, and prepared for another day. They had heard rumors of strange sightings in the sky, but nothing had been confirmed. Life, for the most part, continued as normal. But that would change in an instant. The human military was still reeling from the recent discovery of an alien presence in their space. The Zethar had made their first move, sending scout ships into human territory to test their defenses. These scouts were not meant to be a direct threat. They were there to probe, to gather information. But the humans had been quick to respond, sending out their own ships to investigate. The tension between the two species was palpable, though neither side had officially declared war. However, both knew it was only a matter of time before things escalated. At the Zethar Command Center aboard the Zoreth, General Zarkin stood before a massive screen, watching the data streams flicker across the interface. His mind was focused, his thoughts sharp. He knew the humans were preparing for something. But what? Had they already mobilized their forces? Were they planning an offensive? He couldn't afford to wait any longer. "We move tonight," Zarkin said, his voice steady, though there was a hint of uncertainty in his words. The decision had been made. The council had failed to reach a consensus, and now Zarkin was forced to act on his own. Viewership, still a staunch supporter of the Warhawk faction, was eager for action. "Yes, General. It's time to strike before they get too strong. If we wait, they will only become more dangerous." Zarkin nodded, but he could feel a gnawing doubt in the back of his mind. He had warned them. He had urged caution. And now, as the fleet prepared to launch, he couldn't shake the feeling that this might be a mistake. But there was no turning back. Across the galaxy, humanity's response to the impending threat was already in motion. The human military had been preparing for a confrontation with unknown alien forces ever since the first signs of the Zdar presence. The initial reports had been vague, but the warning signs were enough to trigger an emergency meeting of the United Nations. The fear of an alien invasion had shaken the world to its core, but it also united the nations of Earth in a way that had never been seen before. As the world's leaders gathered in secret, the first steps were taken to form a unified defense. Military forces, initially stationed in different regions, were consolidated into a global command. Space forces were bolstered, and emergency protocols were put in place to deal with any potential alien threat. Captain Lena Harrison, one of Earth's most experienced fighter pilots, stood ready at the helm of the new flagship, the Valor. She had been briefed on the intelligence reports and knew that the situation was dire. But despite the uncertainty, she was confident in her people. Humanity had survived countless challenges before. This was no different. She would not back down. "Command, this is Captain Harrison." She said into the comms, her voice steady despite the tension in the air. "Our forces are ready. We've received reports of Sci-Fi activity near the outer colonies. Are we authorized to engage?" The voice of General Carter, the leader of Earth's unified military command, came through the comm system. "Captain, you are cleared to engage. Defend Earth at all costs. This is not just about us. It's about our future. Remember, we fight for the survival of our people." Lena nodded, determination in her eyes. Earth was at a crossroads, and she knew the stakes were higher than they had ever been. The Sci-Fi had come to their doorstep, and humanity would respond with everything they had. The battle was about to begin. As the Sci-Fi fleet descended upon Earth, Zarkin stood in the command center of the Zoreth, his mind consumed by the weight of his decision. He had led countless campaigns, defeated enemies across the galaxy, but this felt different. The humans were not like the others. They were unpredictable. Their tactics were strange, their soldiers fierce. He could feel the tension building. "General," Viewership said, breaking the silence, "the fleet is ready. Our ships are positioned to strike at the heart of their defenses. We will overwhelm them with sheer power." Zarkin's gaze remained fixed on the screens in front of him. He had made his choice, but a part of him still questioned whether it was the right one. He had hoped that diplomacy would work, but now, as the first wave of ships prepared to engage, there was no turning back. "Begin the attack," Zarkin commanded, his voice resolute. The Sci-Fi fleet surged forward, massive warships cutting through the atmosphere. The sheer scale of the invasion was awe-inspiring, but it was also terrifying. This was the beginning of a war that would determine the fate of Earth and the future of the Sci-Fi Empire. Back on Earth, Captain Harrison watched as the first explosions lit up the sky. A battle had begun. The humans would not go down without a fight. "Prepare for engagement," Lena shouted to her crew. "This is it. We defend Earth. We fight for our survival." The human fighters surged into the skies, ready to meet the invading force head-on. The world held its breath as the first shots were fired, and the war for Earth began in earnest. Zarkin watched the screens with a heavy heart. The humans were resilient, but he feared that their courage would not be enough against the overwhelming might of the Zithar Empire. The question now was, could Earth survive the first strike? Could humanity hold its ground, or would the Zithar Empire crush them before they even had a chance to fight back? The fate of two civilizations rested on the outcome of this battle, and neither side was willing to give up easily. The battle for Earth raged on above the planet's surface. The Zithar fleet, with its massive warships and advanced technology, was a sight to behold. But despite the overwhelming force, the humans refused to surrender. Their fighter jets zipped through the sky, weaving in and out of enemy fire, dodging blasts from the Zithar ships with incredible agility. It was clear that humanity's military had more than just strength. They had determination. Captain Lena Harrison, piloting her fighter jet Phoenix, weaved through the chaos of explosions and gunfire. Her heart raced as she fired back at his Zithar scout ship, sending it spiraling out of control. She could hear the voice of her co-pilot, Lieutenant Max Donovan, in her ear, urging her to stay focused. "Captain, watch your six," Max shouted. Lena twisted the controls, flipping her jet upside down to avoid his Zithar missile. Her fingers were steady on the trigger as she returned fire, hitting the enemy ship with pinpoint accuracy. "Got him," she muttered to herself, feeling the adrenaline surge through her veins. They had been training for this moment for months, and now it was time to see if their preparations were enough. The humans were fighting with everything they had. They were outnumbered, but they fought like cornered animals, using their wits and skill to outmaneuver the technologically superior Zithar forces. For every Zithar ship that was destroyed, another seemed to take its place, but the humans showed no sign of slowing down. Back on the ground, military units across Earth were mobilizing. Cities that had once been calm were now buzzing with activity as soldiers prepared for a possible ground assault. Earth's leaders, working together in a rare show of unity, had implemented emergency plans that had been put in place for situations like this. The humans were not only fighting in the sky, they were preparing to take the battle to the ground if necessary. General Zarkin watched from the command center of the Zoreth, his face stoic as the battle unfolded. His fleet was powerful, but he had not anticipated the ferocity with which the humans were responding. They were more resilient than he had imagined. Their fighters were small, but they were fast and precise, causing significant damage to his ships. This was not the quick victory he had envisioned. "General, we're taking heavy losses," Varak reported, his voice strained. "The human fighters are more skilled than we anticipated. We need to reconsider our strategy." Zarkin's mind raced. He had expected a battle of sheer strength, not one of agility and strategy. The humans were making it clear that they were not going to fall easily. He had known that Earth's military had grown stronger over the years, but this was something else entirely. The humans were fighting with the kind of desperation that made them unpredictable. Zarkin's thoughts turned to the scout ship he had sent down earlier. Trax's reports had been unclear, but there was something in the scouts' messages that had hinted at this. The humans weren't just organized. They were resourceful. They had a way of using their environment, their surroundings, to their advantage, and that made them difficult to predict. "Send in the ground forces," Zarkin finally ordered. "We will take the fight to their planet. If we cannot win in the air, we will crush them on the ground." The Zithar fleet's massive warships began their descent, breaking through Earth's atmosphere. Their advanced weapon systems were ready to lay waste to the cities below. But the humans were ready for this too. They had prepared for the worst, and now the ground battle was about to begin. In the heart of the largest human military base, Lena's unit received a signal. The Zithar ships were coming in for an invasion. They had to stop them before they reached the surface. With a quick exchange of commands, Lena and her fellow pilots rushed back to base, their fighter jets making a beeline for the sky once again. "Ready the ground forces," General Carter's voice came through the comms. "This is it. We're in for the fight of our lives." Lena's heart pounded in her chest as she prepared for what was to come. She had always been ready for a battle, but this was different. This wasn't just another mission. It was a fight for the survival of her species. As the Zethar warships neared the ground, they unleashed a barrage of weapons, firing lasers and missiles at military bases and key infrastructure. The explosions rocked the Earth's surface, sending shockwaves through the air. Buildings crumbled and chaos erupted. But the humans didn't panic. They had prepared. Ground forces mobilized, and soldiers armed with advanced weapons took up positions, ready to defend their cities and their way of life. They fought back with everything they had: tanks, drones, and even handheld weapons designed to take down the mighty Zethar ships. Despite their technological advantage, the Zethar were being pushed back, surprised by the humans' fierce resistance. Lena's squadron returned to the battlefield, ready to take on the incoming warships. She led the charge, her jet cutting through the air as she locked onto one of the descending starships. "Target acquired," she said, her voice cold with determination. "Engage." Missiles shot from her jet, hitting the ship dead on. The explosion was massive, sending the enemy warship plummeting to the ground. But this was only the beginning. More starships were coming, and the humans knew they had to hold their ground. If they failed, Earth would fall. The battle in the skies was intense, but the real test was on the ground. The Zethar Empire was not going to give up easily. They had the numbers and the power. But the humans had something the Zethar had not accounted for: resilience, and the will to fight to the very end. As the hours passed, the fate of the planet hung in the balance. Would humanity's will to survive be enough to turn the tide, or would the Zethar Empire crush their hopes of victory? General Zarkin watched the destruction unfold, torn between his respect for the humans' tenacity and the realization that they were not the easy target he had thought them to be. The war had reached a turning point. The Zethar Empire had made a grave mistake, and it was one they might not be able to undo. The battle continued to rage, but something had shifted. The Zethar forces, though mighty and advanced, were beginning to show signs of struggle. Their once unquestioned superiority in the skies was being chipped away by the relentless assault of human pilots. Below, the ground forces were proving just as resilient. Human soldiers, armed with a mix of high-tech weapons and raw determination, had turned their cities into fortresses. Each defense line they held was a testament to their unwavering will to survive. General Zarkin, watching from the Zorith Command Center, felt a growing sense of unease. He had never expected this. His fleet, vast and powerful, had been outmaneuvered by these humans, and their ground forces were making things even worse. The human spirit was unlike anything he had encountered before. He had seen countless civilizations fall before the Zethar Empire, but these humans were different. They fought with everything they had, not just for victory, but for the future of their species. "General," Varak said, his voice tight with frustration, "our ships are being destroyed faster than we anticipated. The humans are adapting too quickly. They are not like the others we faced. We need reinforcements." Zarkin's eyes remained fixed on the screen, watching as another of his ships was brought down by a barrage of human missiles. It was clear that the humans were not just fighting back. They were learning. They were using their surroundings, working in teams, and adjusting their tactics to counter every move the Zethar made. This was no longer just a battle of firepower. It was a test of wills. "Send in the reinforcements," Zarkin said quietly, but his mind was already elsewhere. He had to consider the bigger picture. They were not just facing a military force. They were facing something much more dangerous: a united people determined to protect their home. On Earth, the situation was equally dire. The battle had taken a heavy toll on both sides. Cities had been destroyed, civilians were in hiding, and the ground forces were barely holding on. But in the midst of the chaos, something extraordinary was happening. People were rising up from every corner of the globe, joining the fight, lending their support to the soldiers who were on the front lines. Even civilians who had never held a weapon before were stepping forward, ready to defend their world. Captain Lena Harrison, who had been leading the human fighters, watched as her squadron returned to base for refueling. Her jet, Phoenix, had seen heavy damage, but she had managed to stay in the air. Her team had lost members, but she had not lost hope. As long as they were still fighting, there was a chance for victory. "We're not giving up," Lena said, her voice steady as she addressed her team. "We fight for each other. We fight for everyone on this planet. We are not losing this." Her co-pilot, Lieutenant Max Donovan, nodded. "We're in this together, Captain. We've come this far, and we're not backing down now." The human resistance was stronger than ever. Even as the Zethar forces seemed to overwhelm the skies, the humans had adapted. They had found new ways to fight back, using tactics that the Zethar had not expected. Their military had become more than just a fighting force. It had become a symbol of hope, a beacon of humanity's will to survive. Meanwhile, General Carter, overseeing the human ground forces, watched as the battle unfolded. His forces were stretched thin, but they were holding the line. Soldiers were moving from one position to the next, defending key infrastructure and protecting civilian areas. The Zethar were powerful, but the humans were proving that they were not just fighters. They were survivors. "I've never seen anything like this," Carter muttered to his officers. "They just keep coming. They don't stop. It's like they have no fear." "It's their spirit, sir," one of the officers replied. "They're fighting for something bigger than themselves. This is their home. They'll do whatever it takes to protect it." Carter nodded. "We've underestimated them. We can't let up now." Back in the sky, Lena's squadron was preparing for another assault. This time, they had a plan. Something new, something that would give them an edge. They knew the Zethar were beginning to retreat, but they couldn't let their guard down. Every human fighter was a small but vital part of the greater effort, and they had to continue to push forward. "Listen up," Lena said, speaking into the comms as her team gathered. "We've learned a lot in this fight, and we've seen how the Zethar respond. We can outsmart them. This next strike, we're going after their command ship. If we take that down, we can cripple their operation." Max spoke up. "It's going to be risky, Captain. The command ship is heavily guarded." Lena's eyes were filled with determination. "We'll make them pay. We can do this, together." The squadron prepared to launch once more. This wasn't just a mission, it was their final push. They knew that if they succeeded, they could turn the tide of the war. If they failed, Earth might fall. As the jets soared into the sky once more, the battle below continued to unfold. The Zethar forces were beginning to regroup, but their confidence was shaken. The humans had proven that they could adapt, that they could fight back with everything they had. And the Zethar general knew that they were beginning to lose the upper hand. Zarkin watched the unfolding battle, his thoughts conflicted. The humans were strong, far stronger than he had expected. And yet he still believed that the Zethar Empire could overcome them. But every passing moment that the humans held their ground made it harder to hold on to that belief. "I will not let this planet fall," Zarkin muttered under his breath. He knew that if the humans succeeded in their mission, if they destroyed the Zethar command ship, the consequences would be devastating. But he also knew that he could not afford to underestimate them any longer. The war was far from over, but the Zethar were starting to realize that this would not be an easy victory. The humans had something that the Zethar lacked, the indomitable spirit of a species unwilling to surrender. And that might just be the key to their survival. The final battle for Earth had begun. The Zethar forces, though still powerful, were now on the defensive. Their once unshakable confidence was being tested like never before. They had underestimated humanity, and the humans were making them pay for it. Every city, every military base, and every corner of the planet had become a battlefield, and the Zethar Empire was beginning to realize that their conquest of Earth might not go as planned. General Zarkin stood in the command center of the Zoreth, staring at the battlefield through the vast screen before him. His fleet was slowly retreating, battered and broken by the relentless attacks of the human forces. But there was one last chance, one last strike, that could turn the tide of the war in the Zithar's favor. "Prepare the final assault," Zarkin ordered, his voice firm but tinged with the weariness of a leader who had fought too long and too hard. "We will give them everything we have. If Earth is to be ours, it will be taken by force." Viewership, standing beside him, looked at the general with a mixture of admiration and doubt. "General, are you certain? The humans, they have proven themselves formidable. We may not be able to defeat them with this final attack." Zarkin turned to face Viewership, his eyes narrowed with determination. "If we don't act now, we lose everything. This is the only chance we have to end it all." The Zithar fleet began to gather for their last assault. Massive warships, each bristling with weapons, prepared to launch their final attack on Earth. The plan was simple: crush the human resistance, destroy their remaining military forces, and strike at the heart of their civilization. The Zithar Empire had not come this far to fail now. Meanwhile, on Earth, Captain Lena Harrison and her squadron were preparing for what would be the most dangerous mission of their lives. Lena's fighter jet, Phoenix, had been damaged in previous skirmishes, but she was still determined to keep fighting. The humans had proven they could hold their own, but this final assault from the Zithar was unlike anything they had faced before. "We know what we're up against," Lena said to her team, her voice steady and confident. "This is it. If we can destroy their command ship, we can end this war. We can take our planet back." Max Donovan, Lena's co-pilot, nodded. "We've trained for this. We've fought hard to get here, and we're not stopping now. We'll make sure Earth survives." The squadron launched into the sky, a final push to defend their home. As they soared into the sky, Lena could feel the weight of the moment. This wasn't just another mission. It wasn't just about winning a battle. This was about survival. The survival of Earth, of humanity, and of everything they held dear. As the Zithar fleet descended upon the planet, the first wave of human fighters engaged, charging toward the enemy ships with every weapon at their disposal. The air was thick with explosions and the deafening sounds of war. Humans fought with a strength and determination that the Zithar had never seen before. They were relentless, refusing to give an inch, pushing back with everything they had. Lena and her squadron raced toward the heart of the Zithar fleet, targeting the command ship, the key to their entire operation. It was heavily guarded, surrounded by warships and automated defense systems, but Lena had no doubt. This was their last chance, and they couldn't afford to fail. "We're going in," Lena said, her voice calm and focused. "Stay close and stay sharp." The squadron split into smaller groups, weaving through the Zithar defenses, dodging laser fire and missiles. Lena's heart pounded in her chest as she locked onto the command ship. This was it, the mission that would decide the fate of Earth. Max's voice came over the comms. "Captain, we've got incoming missiles. Get ready to take evasive action." Lena's hands flew over the controls, expertly maneuvering her jet through a series of complex evasions. Her eyes were fixed on the target. There was no turning back now. She fired a missile at one of the Zithar warships blocking their path, causing it to explode in a fiery blaze. The way was clear. "Target locked," Lena said, her voice low but full of determination. Firing. The missile shot from her jet, hurtling toward the command ship. Time seemed to slow as the missile streaked through space, heading straight for its target. The explosion was deafening, a massive burst of light that sent shockwaves through the sky. But the battle was not over. The Zithar fleet retaliated, sending wave after wave of ships to counter the human assault. The air was thick with the sound of weapons fire and explosions as the two forces clashed in a final desperate struggle. Lena's squadron held their ground, refusing to back down. The fate of Earth depended on this moment. As the battle continued, Lena could see the Zithar fleet beginning to falter. Their command ship had been destroyed, and their forces were starting to retreat. "We've done it," Lena said, a mix of relief and exhaustion in her voice. "We've won." But even as the Zethar retreated, General Zarkin knew that this war had come at a great cost. His fleet had been decimated, and Earth's defenses had proven to be more resilient than he had ever imagined. He looked at the destruction around him and realized that the Zethar Empire might not be able to recover from this defeat. The humans had won. As the last remnants of the Zethar fleet limped away from Earth's atmosphere, General Zarkin knew that the Zethar Empire's long history of conquest had come to an end. He had underestimated the humans, and that was a mistake he would not make again. Lena watched from her cockpit as the final enemy ships retreated, her heart heavy with the weight of the victory. Earth had survived. Humanity had survived. The war was over, but the fight for their future had only just begun.